This is Walking Through Mark 29. Welcome. Good to have opportunity to continue this series. We're near the end. There's only 16 chapters, in case you may not know that. We're in chapter 14, verse 22. If you'd like to read along with me, you're welcome. Chapter 14, 22. So we're not too far away from the conclusion of this short series of lessons. As to the setting, we are in the last few hours, not days, last few hours of Jesus' life before the cross. He is in an upper room in the town or in the city of Jerusalem. And I say that because he's been over the last few days in our study, over those last few days leading up to this, not being in Jerusalem at night, and rather going out of town to a neighboring town or village, and in the city in the day to Bethany or another village or something at night, and enter Judas as a betrayer in arranging with the enemies of Jesus how to get him at night. They don't want to get him in the day. He's right in front of them in the daytime, and they won't lay a hand on him. But they can't they can't find him or know where he's at, or he's not even in town at night. But Judas says, give for some money, 30 pieces of silver is the amount, by the way. For some money, I'll give you a convenient time to nab him, to grab him, to arrest him, and you can do it at night, is the idea. So now he's inside the town at night, but there's not much prior opportunity for Judas to know exactly where the place is. And I go to last study, the number 28 in this series, and you can learn more about that. So he's there in the upper room. Passover is being observed, a memorial, a celebration of the deliverance of the people of Israel many years, 1,500 years prior, under the leadership of Moses. Most of you know that story. In the Passover, not only observing their deliverance, but their escape of the last plague, the death of the firstborn, and so forth. Most of you probably know that story. Okay, so let's get right to it. This is verse 22. And as they were eating, meaning the Passover, and as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many. Assuredly I say to you, I will no longer drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Couple things to point out here before resuming the reading, and that is this. Listen to just how concise Mark is in recording this. Not only concise is it Jesus' words about it, his statements surrounding and we later, of course, in the scriptures hear this called the Lord's Supper. It's not called that then, that moment. It's at the conclusion of the Passover meal. He takes two parts. There's more to it in the Passover meal. For instance, there's a Passover lamb. That meat is used, but there's no meat mentioned here. But he does take bread, and he takes the fruit of the vine, a cup, and he makes mention of how this is going to be representative of something else. Those other items represented things too in the Passover celebration, but now he makes it focused on something having to do with him, and as I said later, it's referred to as the Lord's Supper. And I almost lost my point. Let me get back to it before I forget. And that is that just listen to how brief Jesus is in describing this great, and I mean, is that ever an understatement? This great memorial institution. And Mark is very concise, and of course, Mark is that way about a lot of things. From chapter 1 through to chapter 16, he's very brief, concise, to the point. Shows Jesus to be a great man of action, and activities and incidents in his life are recorded. Some attention given to his teachings, but not near as much as maybe the other gospel records give. But anyway, it just strikes me as, wow, this communion now that has come down 2,000 years later, still huge. I mean, it's such a big, big, big event. And when you hear it instituted, it's it's so small by way of attention given to it, by way of words, and then the record of those words. By the way, though, that's one of the interesting phenomenons, interesting traits or qualities or characteristics, maybe is a better way of saying that, of the inspired record, the Bible, the Holy Scriptures, is this very unusual brevity in dealing with a lot of stupendous and magnificent and marvelous things. And human beings tend to be very wordy, verbose, whatever. I don't know all the ways of describing that. I mean, we tend to write just huge volumes about some one event that took just a few minutes to take place, and here it's next to nothing. I say it is something, but it's amazing how it's next to nothing, just a very few words, and that's it. One more thing too, I might mention, and we'll continue the reading, and that is that Jesus indicates the kingdom's coming soon. He had already said that back in chapter 9. If you wish to go back and read, or just go back in these series of lessons that I'm recording here, you'll find it. This is nothing new. He had been talking about the kingdom coming all the way back to chapter 1. And then in chapter 9, he says something like this: some of you standing right here won't die until you see it happening. And then here he says, I'll not be drinking this cup with you anymore. This is verse 25, until I do so in the kingdom. And so he continues to be very much not just aware, that's true, aware, but promoting in a way, without making too much fanfare over it, nonetheless putting out there, I'll be drinking this, but next time it'll be in the kingdom. Okay, verse 27. Then Jesus said to them, all of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, and he quotes scripture now, he says, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Verse 28. But after I've been raised, I'll go before you, rather, to Galilee. Peter said to him, even if all are made to stumble, yet I will not be. Jesus said to him, assuredly I say to you that today, even this night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he spoke more vehemently, if I have to die with you, I'll not deny you. And they all said likewise. Catch that? And they all said likewise. Peter gets a bad rap, and I don't mean bad like it's a false charge. I mean, we really hate to hear Peter talking this way. He's so outspoken, and a lot of times he comes out with some gems, and other times he puts his foot in his mouth, and it's like Peter has a hard time knowing when to speak. Well, he doesn't have a hard time knowing when to speak. He has a hard time knowing when not to speak. And sometimes that's wiser than to say something. You may recall at the Transfiguration when Jesus was changed, I think Mark says he said such and such because he didn't know what to say, if I remember that correctly. Sometimes Peter is saying things because something needs to be said and I don't know what to say, but I got to say something. Well, actually, no. Wisdom would be better not saying anything. And so anyway. Okay, this has to be conversation. I say has to be. It appears quite probable that this is conversation as they're walking along. The verse that we read earlier was they sang a hymn and they went out to the Mount of Olives. So going out of Jerusalem, finding an exit wall, or not wall, an exit through the wall at a gate, going down almost immediately through a valley, a brook, we'd call it a creek, was crossed. A brook, Kedron is his name, Kidron, I think, according to the spelling. And then almost immediately, of course, after that, you start an upward movement into the mount, of Olives. And so while they're walking along, and by the way, this is at night. I don't know if I said that yet. This is at night. I'll just pick a number. This is midnight. This is, and you might say, how do you know that? Well, I don't know exactly. Was it 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock as we reckon time? But we do know that things that are about to, in fact, we already are starting to talk about them here as they're transpiring. We'll see that Jesus is up all night until daybreak, and then of course the cross is a little bit later in the morning, but a little bit later on that day. So it would appear to be late at night, 10, 11, 12, 1, I don't know exactly, but we're not talking, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're talking at night. I say that to say this. You might say, well, who cares what time it is? He indicates to Peter, Jesus does, he indicates to Peter, and it is in response to him so vehemently, so passionately, we'd probably say, no way would I ever deny you. No way. I mean, even if it costs me my life, I would not deny you to save my life. And Peter, Jesus responds, Peter, before the rooster crows, how does he put it? Twice. Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. We're talking just a few hours later. We're talking, I'll pick a number, 5, 6 hours later probably at the most. Roosters crow. I mean, I haven't grown up on a farm, but I know roosters crow usually before you see the sun, but as the sun is rising. You farmers that are watching this may have to correct me on that. But I think my point, at the earliest signs of daylight coming, even before the sun is seen, roosters start crowing. And so I'll just pick a number. I like to do that to make it stick in our minds maybe a little better. If that's 5 o'clock in the morning, let's say, and this is midnight, we're talking just 4 or 5 hours later. 3 times, not just once, 3 times. I wonder how Peter thought. I just wonder what was going on in his mind when he heard Jesus say that. He is so passionately saying it'll never happen. I mean, they may, but not me. They'll have to speak for themselves, but I won't. And did you catch that last phrase? In fact, I think I read it twice, and they all said likewise. That's verse 31. So Peter gets the attention, and maybe rightly so, but they're all chiming in basically the same thing. You know what this reminds me of? And I'm a little, once again, this is later on. In fact, I don't know if Mark deals with it. It's John deals with it in his record about who we call Doubting Thomas, one of the apostles. They were all doubters, though. But because of his not being present on a certain occasion and saying, I'll have to see the wounds before I'll believe, he goes down in history as Doubting Thomas. But they were all doubters. And here you have it here. Peter, and I'm not saying wrongly so, but he's looked at as being, man, that is awful that Peter would say such as that and so forth. How weak is he? Well, they were all saying the same thing, but Peter gets the attention. What can I say about that? I don't know that I have to, but I want to say something about that. We are poor estimators, if that's a word. Evaluators is another way of saying it. We are poor, we human beings, are poor evaluators of our faith. And I don't mean that we can't give any estimation of how we're doing. I don't mean to say that we don't know anything. But are we ever poor evaluators? I'm going to stay with that because I can't think of a better word right now. Appraiser, well, I like evaluator. We're poor in judging within ourselves how we're doing well, spiritually. Maybe it's because we mean well. Jesus, on one occasion, it's coming up later, by the way, he says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Maybe that's why we know we mean well, and so we overestimate just how well we are meaning. We mean well, and we think we're doing good, and I have strong faith. Oh, it's amazing. I don't know. You can tell by my lack of good, adequate description here. It's amazing to me how poor we are at doing that. Peter, we love Peter, by the way. Judas, may not name our kids Judas. Peter, oh, we love Peter. We'll name her. Peter, though, I've often asked a question about it. I said, who has done the worst sin with regard to Jesus? I mean, at the cross or just prior to the cross, Judas or Peter? And the answer is meant to be, I say meant, what I'm looking for is neither. Neither's done anything worse than the other. Judas goes down in history, though, because of the way he dealt with his sin afterwards, as opposed to Peter. That makes a big difference, I think. But both of them did terribly in regard to dealing with Jesus just before the cross. Okay, we'll have opportunity to talk a little bit more about Peter because it's coming up the actual denial. But here it's being spoken about just hours before happening. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times, and I mean in short order. I mean not over the 30 years, next 30 years of your life, but I'm saying it will be 3 times before the rooster crows 2 times that you will have denied me. And that's going to be in the next few hours. I can just imagine Peter saying, no way. Yes, way. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Okay, we'll deal with that soon. But that's it for today. Thank you so much.